The moment Sloane dropped her bombshell, I knew my life was about to change forever. We were sitting in her pristine downtown condo, the one she'd insisted on renting after deciding my apartment building wasn't professional enough for someone in her position. "From now on, I decide when we spend time together," she announced, not even looking up from her phone. "Stop bothering me with your constant need for attention." I stared at her manicured nails tapping against the glass coffee table. After 3 years together, this was how she chose to redefine our relationship, like she was handing down commandments from some corporate mountaintop. "Excuse me?" I managed to say, though my voice sounded strange even to myself. Sloane finally looked up, her green eyes cold as January in Boston. "You heard me, Jake. I'm busy building my career at Pinnacle Tech. I can't have you calling and texting every day like some needy teenager. When I want to see you, I'll let you know." I nodded slowly. In my 38 years, I'd learned that sometimes nodding was safer than letting my sarcasm loose, especially when dealing with someone who held grudges like vintage wine. "So that's it?" I asked. "You're putting our relationship on your schedule?" "Exactly." She returned to scrolling through whatever was more important than this conversation. "I'm glad you understand." I understood, all right. I understood that Sloane Mitchell, ambitious HR manager and self-proclaimed queen of work-life balance, had just relegated me to the status of a convenience store, open only when she needed something. I stood up from her expensive couch, the one she'd bought without asking my opinion. "Well then, I guess I'll wait for your call." "Good," she said, still not looking at me. "Lock the door on your way out." Walking through the foggy streets of our decaying New England coastal city, I felt something shift inside me. The old Jake would have called her the next day, apologizing for some imagined slight. The old Jake would have bent over backward to win back her attention. But the old Jake was apparently no longer welcome in Sloane's perfectly organized world. Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. 2 weeks passed without a word from me. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits to her office with coffee and pastries. I went about my business as the superintendent of a 3-story apartment building on Maple Street, fixing leaky faucets and unclogging drains like nothing had changed. Mrs. Cordero, my boss and the building owner, noticed the difference immediately. "You seem lighter lately, Jake," she said as I replaced a broken window latch in 2B. "More focused." "Just taking things one day at a time," I replied, testing the latch mechanism. What I didn't tell her was that I'd been spending my evenings at Lou's gym, the same place where I'd trained as a semi-professional boxer in my 20s. Lou Castellano, now 72 with hands like leather gloves, had welcomed me back without questions. "Muscle memory's a beautiful thing," Lou said as I worked the heavy bag. "Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget." The rhythm of training felt good. Jab, cross, hook, uppercut. Simple, direct, honest. Unlike the games Sloane preferred to play. On a Thursday morning, while I was installing new bathroom fixtures in the building's basement apartment, my phone buzzed with a text from Des, my best friend since high school. "Sloane's been asking about you, wants to know if you're okay." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Tell her I'm fine." "She seems worried," Des responded almost immediately. "She made her choice," I replied, then put the phone away. But Sloane wasn't content to let sleeping dogs lie. The next morning, she showed up at my building during peak breakfast hours, when half my tenants were rushing off to work, and the other half were nursing hangovers. I was in the lobby, explaining to Mr. Patterson from 3A why his rent couldn't be paid in cryptocurrency, when the front door burst open like a hurricane had arrived. "Jake!" Sloane's voice echoed through the small lobby. "We need to talk." Every head turned. Mrs. Kelly from 1C paused mid-step on the stairs, clearly delighted by the unexpected drama. Mr. Patterson's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into his receding hairline. "I'm working," I said calmly, not moving from behind the lobby desk. "I don't care." Sloane marched over, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum. She looked immaculate as always. Designer blazer, perfect makeup, hair that probably cost more to maintain than most people's rent. "You can't just disappear like that. It's manipulative." The irony was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. "I thought you decided when we spent time together," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm just respecting your boundaries." Mrs. Cordero emerged from her ground floor apartment, drawn by the commotion. She took one look at the situation and crossed her arms. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her Puerto Rican accent lending authority to every syllable. Sloane turned to her with that fake smile she used on difficult clients. "I'm sorry for the disturbance. I just need to speak with Jake privately." "This is his workplace," Mrs. Cordero replied firmly, "and you're disrupting my tenants." I watched Sloane's composure crack slightly. She wasn't used to people who didn't automatically defer to her wishes. "Jake," she said, turning back to me with desperation creeping into her voice, "this is ridiculous. You're acting like a child." "Am I?" I asked. "Or am I just following the rules you established?" The lobby had gone completely silent. Even Mr. Patterson seemed to have forgotten about his cryptocurrency concerns. "Fine," Sloane said, her voice rising. "If this is how you want to play it, then we're done. Completely done." "Okay," I said simply. She stared at me for a moment, clearly expecting a different reaction. When none came, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the front door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. The silence stretched for several seconds before Mrs. Kelly spoke up. "Well," she said with obvious satisfaction, "that was better than my morning soap opera." Mrs. Cordero waited until the other tenants had dispersed before approaching my desk. "You all right, mijo?" she asked quietly. "I'm fine," I said, and for the first time in months, I actually meant it. That afternoon, Des called me while I was replacing a garbage disposal in 2C. "What did you do?" he asked without preamble. "What do you mean?" "Sloane just spent an hour telling me how you humiliated her in front of your neighbors. She's really upset, Jake." I wiped my hands on a shop rag and considered my response. Des had been my friend for 20 years, but he'd always had a soft spot for damsels in distress, especially attractive ones like Sloane. "She came to my workplace and made a scene," I said. "I didn't do anything except not react the way she wanted." "She says you've changed, that you're not the same person she fell in love with." "Maybe I'm not," I admitted. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "She asked me to keep an eye on you," Des said finally. "Make sure you're not doing anything reckless." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What kind of reckless?" "I don't know, man. She just seems to think you might do something stupid." After I hung up, I sat in the empty apartment, surrounded by the honest smell of plumbing work and fresh caulk. Sloane was worried I might do something reckless. That was interesting. It was also the first sign that maybe she wasn't as indifferent to my absence as she'd pretended to be. The next few days passed quietly, but I could feel something building beneath the surface. Sloane had always been the type to escalate when she didn't get her way, and my refusal to play her game was clearly eating at her. The first real sign of trouble came on Monday morning. Mrs. Cordero called me into her apartment before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. "Sit down, Jake," she said, gesturing to her kitchen table. Her tone was serious, and that worried me. "What's wrong?" I asked, settling into the chair across from her. "I got a call yesterday from your girlfriend." Ex-girlfriend, I thought, but didn't correct her. "She told me some things," Mrs. Cordero continued, her dark eyes studying my face. "Said you've been acting unstable, drinking too much, talking about getting back at people who've wronged you." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's not true." "I know it's not," she said firmly. "I've worked with you for 3 years, mijo. You're one of the most reliable people I know." But she was very convincing, very concerned. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that your personal life is your business, and if I had concerns about your work, I'd address them directly with you." Mrs. Cordero leaned forward. "But Jake, you need to be careful. This woman, she's trying to cause problems for you." I nodded, feeling a familiar anger building in my chest. It was one thing for Sloane to play games with our relationship. It was another entirely for her to try to sabotage my livelihood. "Thanks for the heads up," I said. "Just watch yourself," Mrs. Cordero warned. "People like that, they don't stop until they get what they want." That evening, I headed to Lou's gym to work off my frustration. The old boxing gym occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse near the docks, its windows fogged with decades of sweat and ambition. The familiar smell of leather and liniment welcomed me like an old friend. "You're hitting harder tonight," Lou observed as I worked the heavy bag. "Something eating at you?" I told him about Sloane's call to my boss. Lou listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of disapproval. "Women like that," he said when I finished, "they fight dirty. No rules, no honor, just whatever it takes to win." "I'm not looking for a fight," I said, unwrapping my hands. "Maybe not," Lou replied, "but sometimes the fight finds you anyway." Walking home through the narrow streets of our downtown district, I decided to take a detour past Sloane's office building. I told myself I was just curious, but the truth was more complicated. I wanted to understand what I was dealing with. Pinnacle Tech occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated brick building that had once housed a textile factory. Through the large windows, I could see the glow of computer screens and the movement of people working late. I was about to continue home when I spotted something that made me stop in my tracks. Sloane's silver Honda was still in the parking lot, but she wasn't alone. A man was leaning against the driver's side door, and they were talking intently. I recognized him immediately, Elliot Brennan, a local real estate agent who specialized in waterfront properties. He was the kind of guy who wore expensive cologne and talked too loud at restaurants, the kind who drove a white Tesla and posted gym selfies on social media. From where I stood, I could see Sloane laughing at something he said. Her body language was relaxed, intimate. This wasn't a business conversation. I watched for several minutes as they talked, noting the way she touched his arm, the way he leaned closer than necessary. When they finally separated, Elliot walked to his Tesla while Sloane got into her Honda. They left the parking lot in different directions, but the timing felt coordinated. Standing alone under a flickering streetlight, I felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Sloane's sudden need for space, her concern about me becoming reckless, her attempt to undermine my job. She wasn't just trying to control our relationship, she was trying to manage the transition to her next one. The realization should have hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt something else entirely, a cold, calculating anger that reminded me of my boxing days. The moment when you realize your opponent has dropped their guard, leaving themselves open for a counterpunch. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I called Sloane. "Jake?" She sounded surprised, maybe even pleased. "I was hoping you'd call." "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, "about giving you space. You're right. I was being too needy." "Oh." The pleasure in her voice was unmistakable. "Well, I'm glad you understand." "I do. In fact, I think some distance might be good for both of us. Help us figure out what we really want." "Exactly," she said, and I could practically hear her smiling. "I knew you'd come around." "So let's make it official," I continued. "No contact for a month. Give ourselves time to think." There was a pause. "A whole month?" "You said you needed space. I'm giving it to you." "Well, yes, but I didn't mean we couldn't talk at all." "It's better this way," I said firmly. "Clean break, no confusion." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment's small kitchen, drinking coffee and planning my next move. If Sloane wanted to play games, I'd play them better than she ever imagined. That afternoon, I made a trip to the public library and spent several hours researching Elliot Brennan. Social media made it almost too easy. His Instagram was a catalog of his lifestyle. Expensive restaurants, weekend trips to Martha's Vineyard, photos of his boat docked at the marina. More importantly, it showed his patterns. He went to the same gym every Tuesday and Thursday morning. He had lunch at the same waterfront restaurant every Friday. He posted photos of his Tesla in the same parking spots around town. Elliot Brennan was a creature of habit, and habits could be exploited. 2 days later, I put my plan into action. It was a Thursday night, and according to his social media, Elliot was at Waves, a trendy cocktail bar near the marina. I waited in the parking lot until I saw Sloane's Honda arrive. She was dressed to impress, a black dress I'd never seen before, heels that added 3 inches to her height, jewelry that caught the light from the bar's neon sign. This wasn't a casual meeting. I waited until they were inside, then approached Elliot's Tesla. The car was his pride and joy, detailed weekly and parked away from other vehicles to avoid dings and scratches. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out a small bag of sugar and a pocket knife. The sugar went into the gas tank, an old trick that would cause expensive engine problems without being immediately obvious. The knife made quick work of the valve stems on his rear tires, letting the air out slowly enough that he wouldn't notice until he tried to drive. The whole operation took less than 5 minutes. By the time Elliot and Sloane discovered the damage, I was 3 blocks away, walking home through the foggy streets like a man without a care in the world. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. The next morning, Des called with an update. "Did you hear about Elliot Brennan?" he asked. "Should I have?" "Someone trashed his car last night. Sugar in the gas tank, /tires. He's talking about calling the police." "That's terrible," I said, injecting just the right amount of concern into my voice. "Any idea who might have done it?" "He thinks it was some client he screwed over in a real estate deal. Guy's got a lot of enemies, apparently." "Karma's funny that way," I observed. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thought you should know. Elliot and Sloane are at the boathouse tonight. She's not who you think." I stared at the message for a long moment, wondering who had sent it and why. Then I realized it didn't matter. What mattered was the opportunity. The boathouse was part of the marina complex, a converted storage building that Elliot had mentioned in several social media posts. According to his Instagram, he kept his boat there during the winter months. I arrived just as the sun was setting, painting the harbor in shades of orange and red. Elliot's damaged Tesla wasn't in the parking lot, but Sloane's Honda was there, along with a rental car that probably belonged to him. Through the boathouse's salt-stained windows, I could see movement inside. Shadows dancing against the walls, intimate and unmistakable. I took out my phone and started recording. The video quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough to show Sloane and Elliot together, their relationship obviously more than professional. I filmed for several minutes, capturing enough evidence to prove what I'd already suspected. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange sense of liberation. For months, I'd been playing defense in a game I didn't understand. Now, finally, I was ready to go on the offensive. If Sloane wanted to make me the villain in her story, I was going to play the role better than she ever imagined. The anonymous text had been a gift, but I needed to understand where it came from. The next morning, I called the number back, but it went straight to voicemail with no greeting. Whoever had tipped me off wanted to remain hidden. I spent the weekend developing my strategy. The video from the boathouse was good, but I needed more. Sloane was smart and careful. One piece of evidence wouldn't be enough to expose the full scope of her deception. My breakthrough came on Monday, when I was fixing a broken cabinet door in Mrs. Kelly's apartment. She was the building's unofficial gossip coordinator, a 70-year-old widow who knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. "That girlfriend of yours," she said, handing me a cup of coffee while I worked. "She came by again yesterday." I paused, screwdriver in hand. "Sloane was here?" "Oh, yes. Very upset she was, crying about how worried she is for you." Mrs. Kelly's tone suggested she wasn't buying the performance. "Asked a lot of questions about your schedule, your friends, whether you'd been drinking." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're the most reliable young man I know, and if she can't see that, she's a fool." I smiled despite myself. "Thanks, Mrs. Kelly." "But Jake," she continued, her voice growing serious, "that woman is up to something. Mark my words." That afternoon, I decided to visit Sloane's office building again, not to confront her, but to observe. I positioned myself at a coffee shop across the street with a clear view of the Pinnacle Tech parking lot. At 5:30, employees began streaming out of the building. I recognized several of Sloane's co-workers from the company social events she'd dragged me to. There was Aiden from accounting, a nervous guy who always spilled something on his shirt, Mina from marketing, Sloane's self-proclaimed best friend who seemed to thrive on drama. Sloane emerged at 6:15, talking animatedly on her phone. She got into her Honda and drove toward downtown, but instead of heading home, she turned toward the Marina District. I followed at a distance, my old Honda Civic blending invisibly into traffic. She parked at a restaurant called The Anchor, an upscale place that specialized in seafood and overpriced cocktails. Through the restaurant's large windows, I watched her join a table of women I recognized from her social media posts. Mina was there, along with 2 other women from her office. They were already deep into what looked like a serious conversation. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language told a story. Lots of gesturing, heads leaning together conspiratorially, phones being passed around the table. At one point, Mina pulled out her laptop and showed the others something on the screen. This wasn't a casual dinner among friends. This was a strategy session. I stayed for an hour, watching their animated discussion. When they finally paid their check and prepared to leave, I hurried back to my car and positioned myself to follow Sloane home. But she didn't go home. Instead, she drove to a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize and parked in front of a small Cape Cod house with a well-maintained garden. Mina's car was already in the driveway. I parked down the street and waited. 20 minutes later, Elliot's rental car arrived. He went inside without knocking, clearly expected. Now I was really curious. I got out of my car and walked casually down the street, like someone out for an evening stroll. The house's living room curtains were open, and I could see inside clearly. Sloane, Mina, Elliot, and another woman I didn't recognize were sitting around a coffee table covered with papers and laptops. They looked like a corporate planning committee, except this meeting was taking place in someone's living room at 9 p.m. I took out my phone and started recording again, this time focusing on the faces and the papers spread across the table. I couldn't read the documents from my position, but I could see that this was an organized effort involving multiple people. As I watched, Mina pointed at something on her laptop screen, and the others leaned in to look. Sloane nodded and said something that made Elliot laugh. The unknown woman took notes on a legal pad. Whatever they were planning, I was clearly the target. I made my way back to my car and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. The anonymous tip, the coordinated meeting, the careful documentation. This wasn't just about Sloane having an affair. This was something bigger. The next morning, I decided to take a more direct approach. I called Aiden from Sloane's office, the nervous accountant who'd always seemed uncomfortable at social events. "Jake?" He sounded surprised to hear from me. How are you, man? I'm fine, Aiden. Listen, I was wondering if you could help me with something. Sure, what's up? I'm trying to reach Sloane, but she's not answering her phone. Is she in the office today? There was a pause. Actually, she called in sick, said she had food poisoning. Interesting. That's weird. I saw her at the Anchor last night, and she seemed fine. You were at the Anchor? Aiden's voice sharpened with interest. Did you see the others? Others? Mina and the girls from marketing. They had some kind of team dinner there. I could hear the confusion in his voice. He was clearly not part of whatever inner circle Sloane had formed. Yeah, I saw them, I said carefully. Looked like they were having a serious discussion about something. Probably planning their next girls' trip, Aiden said, but he didn't sound convinced. They've been having a lot of meetings lately, very hush-hush. Meetings about what? I don't know. Mina's been acting weird, asking questions about HR policies and employee rights. Sloane's been spending a lot of time in closed-door sessions with the department heads. Oh, after I hung up, I sat in my apartment's kitchen, pieces of the puzzle slowly arranging themselves in my mind. Sloane worked in HR. She had access to employee records, company policies, legal procedures. If she wanted to cause problems for someone, she had the tools to do it professionally. But why the elaborate meetings? Why involve Elliot and the unknown woman? The answer came to me that afternoon, when I was replacing a broken faucet in the building's laundry room. My phone buzzed with another anonymous text from the same number as before. This time, it wasn't just a tip. It was a photo. The image showed a computer screen displaying what looked like a legal document. The text was partially obscured, but I could make out key phrases. Harassment complaint, workplace misconduct, pattern of stalking behavior. My name appeared several times throughout the document. The anonymous sender had included a message. They're building a case against you. Meeting tomorrow night at Mina's house, 8 p.m. You need to see this. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking with anger. Sloane wasn't just trying to move on to her next relationship. She was trying to destroy me completely, using her professional skills and connections to build a legal case that would ruin my reputation and possibly land me in serious trouble. The food poisoning story made sense now. She was taking a day off to work on her project without the distraction of her actual job. I thought about the video I'd taken at the boathouse, the evidence of her affair with Elliot. It seemed almost quaint compared to what she was planning, but I had one advantage she didn't know about. I knew what was coming. That evening, I drove to Lou's gym and spent 2 hours working out my frustration on the heavy bag. Lou watched me with concerned eyes, occasionally offering technical corrections, but mostly just letting me burn off my rage. You're fighting ghosts tonight, he observed as I unwrapped my hands. Maybe, I admitted. But tomorrow night, I'm fighting something real. Need backup? Lou asked seriously. I considered the offer. Lou had connections throughout the city, men who'd grown up in an era when problems were solved with direct action rather than legal documents. Not yet, I said, but I'll let you know. Walking home through the fog-shrouded streets, I felt something shift inside me. The old Jake would have been terrified by what Sloane was planning. He would have called a lawyer, tried to reason with her, maybe even begged for mercy. But the old Jake was gone, replaced by someone harder and more calculating. Someone who understood that when people fight dirty, you have to be willing to get dirty yourself. If Sloane wanted to play games with legal documents and false accusations, I'd show her what a real fight looked like. Tomorrow night at Mina's house, I was going to crash their little strategy session and turn their own weapons against them. I spent Tuesday preparing for the evening's confrontation like a boxer getting ready for a championship fight. Every detail mattered. Every move had to be calculated. First, I visited an electronics store downtown and bought a small digital recorder, the kind private investigators use for surveillance. The clerk, a kid with multiple piercings and a bored expression, showed me how to activate the voice recording feature and transfer files to my phone. Planning to catch a cheating spouse? He asked with a smirk. Something like that, I replied. Next, I stopped by the public library and researched the legal implications of recording conversations. Massachusetts was a two-party consent state, which meant I couldn't legally record people without their permission. But if I was on public property, or if they invited me into their conversation, the rules changed. I also looked up information about false harassment claims and the penalties for filing fraudulent legal documents. If Sloane was building a case against me based on lies, she was committing several crimes herself. By 7 p.m., I was parked down the street from Mina's house, watching the arrivals. Sloane came first, carrying a briefcase and a laptop bag. Elliot arrived 10 minutes later, followed by the unknown woman from the previous night. At 7:45, I got out of my car and walked to the front door. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I'd felt this way before, stepping into the ring against opponents who thought they had me figured out. I rang the doorbell and waited. Mina answered, her face cycling through surprise, confusion, and alarm in the space of 2 seconds. "Jake, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Sloane," I said calmly. "It's important." We're having a private meeting." "I know, that's why I'm here." Before Mina could respond, Sloane appeared behind her, looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Jake, how did you know I was here?" "Lucky guess," I said. "Can we talk? All of us?" Elliot emerged from what looked like the living room, his face flushed with either alcohol or anxiety. The unknown woman stayed in the background, watching the scene unfold with professional interest. "This is private property," Elliot said, trying to sound authoritative. "You need to leave." "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I think you all need to see something first." I opened the video I'd taken at the boathouse and held the phone so they could all see the screen. The footage was clear enough to show Sloane and Elliot in a compromising position, their affair documented in digital clarity. The silence that followed was deafening. "Where did you get that?" Sloane whispered, her face going pale. "Does it matter?" I asked. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "You can't use that," Elliot said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's illegal surveillance." "Is it?" I looked at each of them in turn. "I was on public property, filming through a window. Pretty sure that's legal." The unknown woman stepped forward, and I got my first clear look at her. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from years of courtroom experience. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "I'm Patricia Wells, an attorney. I think you should know that what you're doing could be considered harassment." "Could it?" I smiled. "And what would you call building a fraudulent legal case against someone? Because that's what you're doing here, isn't it?" Patricia's composure slipped slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." I pulled out the digital recorder and set it on the small table by the front door. "But let's make sure we're all clear about what's happening here." "You can't record us without permission," Mina said quickly. "You're right," I agreed. "So I'm asking permission. Can I record our conversation?" They looked at each other uncertainly. Refusing would make them look guilty, but agreeing would put their entire scheme at risk. "Why would you want to record us?" Patricia asked carefully. "Because I want to make sure everyone understands the situation clearly." I looked directly at Sloane. "You've been building a harassment case against me, using your position at Pinnacle Tech and your connections to create false documentation. You've been working with your boyfriend here to coordinate your story, and you've hired an attorney to make it official." "That's not—" Sloane started to protest. "Let me finish," I said firmly. "You've also been spreading rumors about my mental state to my employer, trying to get me fired, and you've been using your friend Mina here to coordinate the whole thing." Mina's face flushed red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" I pulled out my phone again and showed them the photo of the legal document. "Someone sent me this. Looks like a harassment complaint with my name on it." Patricia stepped forward and examined the image. Her expression grew troubled. "Where did you get this?" "Someone who cares about the truth," I said. "Someone who knows what you're really doing here." I looked around the room, studying their faces. Sloane looked terrified. Elliot looked angry. Mina looked guilty. But Patricia looked confused, like she was seeing something that didn't fit her understanding of the situation. "Actually," I continued, "I'm starting to wonder if everyone here is working toward the same goal." "What do you mean?" Sloane asked. I turned to Mina, who was standing near the back of the group, trying to blend into the background. "How long have you been planning this, Mina?" "Planning what?" "The whole thing. The affair, the harassment case, the coordinated attack on my reputation." I smiled coldly. "Because I don't think this is really about Sloane wanting to leave me. I think this is about you wanting to destroy her." The room went completely silent. "That's ridiculous," Mina said, but her voice was shaking. "Is it? You work in marketing, which means you understand how to manipulate public opinion. You have access to Sloane's social media accounts, her email, her contacts. You know all her secrets, all her vulnerabilities." I turned to Patricia. "Did Mina hire you, or did Sloane?" Patricia looked uncomfortable. "I was contacted by Ms. Rodriguez about representing Ms. Mitchell in a harassment case." "Rodriguez?" I looked at Mina. "Your last name is Rodriguez? So what?" "So you hired the lawyer, not Sloane. You're orchestrating this entire thing." I turned back to Sloane, who was staring at her best friend with growing horror. "Think about it, Sloane. Who suggested you needed space from me? Who encouraged you to start seeing Elliot? Who's been pushing you to take legal action?" "Mina's been helping me," Sloane said weakly. "Has she? Or has she been manipulating you into destroying both of our lives? I looked at Elliot. And you? Did you pursue Sloane, or did someone introduce you to her? Elliot's face went pale. Mina. She said Sloane was interested in meeting someone new. The pieces were falling into place, and I could see that Sloane was beginning to understand. Why? She whispered, looking at Mina. Why would you do this? Mina's composure finally cracked completely. Because you deserve it, she shouted, after what you did to me. What are you talking about? The promotion! Mina's voice was shaking with rage. The marketing director position. You went behind my back and told them I was having an affair with my supervisor. Sloane's mouth fell open. That was 2 years ago, and it was true. You were sleeping with David. It wasn't your business. You were my friend. I was trying to protect you from making a mistake that would ruin your career. You ruined my career. They passed me over for the promotion and transferred David to another department. I've been stuck in the same position ever since. The room erupted in shouting as the truth finally came out. Mina had been planning her revenge for 2 years, carefully manipulating Sloane's relationship with me and setting up an elaborate scheme to destroy both of our lives. Patricia, the attorney, was backing toward the door, clearly wanting no part of what was turning into a personal vendetta rather than a legitimate legal case. This is insane, Elliot said, looking around the room wildly. I'm not part of this crazy revenge plot. Aren't you? I asked. You've been sleeping with another man's girlfriend, helping to build a fraudulent legal case, and participating in a conspiracy to commit harassment. You're up to your neck in this. Elliot looked like he was going to be sick. I turned to Sloane, who was crying now, finally understanding how thoroughly she'd been manipulated. The question is, I said quietly, what are we going to do about it? The revelation about Mina's manipulation had shifted the entire dynamic in the room. Sloane was crying, Elliot looked like he wanted to run, Patricia was edging toward the door, and Mina was standing in the corner like a cornered animal. This is all very interesting, I said, picking up my digital recorder. But we're not done yet. What do you want? Sloane asked through her tears. I want the truth, all of it. I looked at each of them in turn. And I want to make sure this never happens again. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Morrison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. If Ms. Rodriguez misrepresented the facts of this case to me, then I need to withdraw from representation immediately. Smart move, I agreed. Because if you'd filed that fraudulent harassment complaint, you'd be looking at serious professional sanctions. Patricia gathered her papers quickly and headed for the door. Ms. Mitchell, Ms. Rodriguez, please don't contact my office again. After she left, the four of us stood in Mina's living room, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. So what now? Elliot asked nervously. Now we figure out how to clean up this mess, I said. Starting with you. I pulled out my phone and opened a new video recording. Elliot, I want you to explain to the camera exactly how you got involved with Sloane. I'm not saying anything without a lawyer present. Your choice. But I've got video of you and Sloane at the boathouse, evidence that you participated in tonight's meeting, and witness testimony that you've been part of a conspiracy to file false legal documents. You can cooperate now, or you can explain it all to the police later. Elliot looked around the room desperately, but found no allies. Sloane was still crying, and Mina was glaring at him with obvious contempt. Fine, he said finally. Mina approached me at the gym about 6 weeks ago, said she had a friend who was interested in meeting someone new. Someone successful and attractive. And you didn't think it was strange that this friend was already in a relationship? Mina said the relationship was basically over, that Sloane was just looking for the right opportunity to end it. I turned the camera toward Sloane. Is that what you told Mina? No, Sloane said emphatically. I never said that. I was frustrated with some things, and I talked to Mina about it. But I never said I wanted to leave you. What kind of things were you frustrated about? Sloane wiped her eyes and looked directly at the camera. I felt like we were in a rut, like we weren't growing together anymore, but I thought we could work through it. So when did you decide you needed space? After Mina kept telling me that you were too needy, that I deserved someone who would give me room to focus on my career. She kept saying I should establish boundaries. I turned the camera back to Mina. Your turn. I'm not saying anything, she said defiantly. Then let me say it for you. I kept the camera rolling as I spoke. You've been systematically manipulating your best friend for 2 years, trying to destroy her relationship as revenge for a perceived slight. You introduced her to Elliot, encouraged her to have an affair, and then tried to use that affair as the basis for a fraudulent legal case against me. You can't prove any of that. Actually, I can. I held up my phone. I've been recording everything tonight. Plus, I have the video from the boathouse, photos of your planning meetings, and witness testimony from multiple sources. Mina's defiance cracked slightly. What witnesses? Your neighbors, for starters. Mrs. Patterson across the street has been watching all these unusual evening meetings with great interest. She even wrote down license plate numbers. This was a bluff, but Mina didn't know that. Then there's Aiden from your office, who's been documenting all the strange questions you've been asking about HR policies. And Patricia, your attorney, who's probably writing up a detailed report about tonight's meeting to protect herself professionally. I could see the fear growing in Mina's eyes as she realized how exposed she was. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not interested in destroying your life the way you tried to destroy mine. I just want this to stop. What do you want from us? Sloane asked. I turned off the video recording and sat down on Mina's couch, suddenly feeling exhausted. I want the harassment complaint destroyed. I want you to call my boss and retract everything you said about my mental state, and I want all of you to stay away from me. That's it? Elliot asked, sounding surprised. That's it. You go your way, I go mine. Clean slate. Sloane looked at me with something that might have been regret. Jake, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, I said quietly. Mina's very good at manipulation. She almost had me convinced I was the problem. What about her? Elliot asked, nodding toward Mina. I looked at Sloane's former best friend, who was still standing in the corner like a trapped animal. That's up to Sloane, I said. But if I were her, I'd be very careful about trusting people who are willing to destroy lives over workplace grudges. Sloane turned to Mina, her expression hardening. I want you to stay away from me. Don't call, don't text, don't come to my office. We're done. Sloane, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been lying to me for 2 years, manipulating me into ruining my relationship and potentially destroying Jake's life, all because you were angry about a promotion. You're not my friend. You never were. Mina's face crumpled, but there was still defiance in her eyes. You'll regret this. Both of you. Is that a threat? I asked, standing up. It's a promise. I pulled out my phone again and started recording. Could you repeat that? I want to make sure I have it clearly documented. Mina realized her mistake and clamped her mouth shut. Smart choice, I said, because threatening someone who has video evidence of your conspiracy to commit fraud probably isn't the best legal strategy. I gathered my things and headed for the door. Sloane, I'll expect that call to my boss tomorrow morning. Elliot, stay away from my building and my workplace. Mina, if you come near any of us again, I'll turn everything I've recorded tonight over to the police. As I reached the door, Sloane called out to me. Jake? I turned back. For what it's worth, I really am sorry. I nodded. I know. Take care of yourself, Sloane. Walking back to my car through the foggy streets, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The immediate threat was over, but the relationship I'd thought I was fighting for was gone forever. My phone buzzed with a text from the anonymous number that had been helping me. Well done. She won't bother you again. I stared at the message, still wondering who my mysterious ally was. But as I drove home through the quiet city streets, I realized it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I'd learned something important about myself. When pushed to the edge, I was capable of fighting back harder and smarter than my enemies expected. It was a lesson I hoped I'd never need to use again, but one I was glad to have learned. I thought the confrontation at Mina's house would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, Sloane did call Mrs. Cordero and retract her statements about my mental state. She was professional about it, explaining that she'd been going through personal issues and had spoken out of frustration rather than fact. Mrs. Cordero accepted the apology graciously, but called me afterward to check in. That woman has more problems than a math textbook, she said. You're better off without her, mijo. I agreed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still brewing beneath the surface. Mina's parting threat had sounded too confident, too specific. She wasn't the type to give up easily. My instincts proved correct on Thursday morning, when Des called me in a panic. Jake, you need to see this, he said without preamble. See what? Check your social media, all of it. I opened Instagram first and immediately saw the problem. Someone had created a fake account using my name and photos and had been posting increasingly unhinged messages about Sloane. The post painted me as an obsessed ex-boyfriend who was stalking her and making threats. Facebook was worse. The fake account there had joined several local community groups and was posting long, rambling messages about how Sloane had destroyed my life and how I was planning to make her pay. Twitter had a similar account that was targeting Sloane's workplace, posting complaints about her unprofessional behavior and demanding that Pinnacle Tech fire the cheating liar. "This is insane," I said, scrolling through post after post of fabricated rage. "It gets worse," Des said. "Check the community Facebook page for downtown businesses." I found the page and saw a post that made my stomach drop. The fake Jake Morrison account had posted a long message claiming that I was planning to make a scene at the upcoming Harbor Days Festival, the city's biggest annual event. "I'm going to expose Sloane Mitchell and her friends for the liars they are," the post read. "Everyone will see what they really are. Saturday at noon, Harbor Days main stage, the truth will come out." The post had been shared dozens of times and had hundreds of comments, most of them expressing concern about public safety. "Someone's trying to frame me," I told Des. "Make it look like I'm planning some kind of public confrontation? Who would do something like that?" I didn't need to think about the answer. Mina. Harbor Days was scheduled for Saturday, just 2 days away. If I showed up at the festival, it would look like I was carrying out the threat posted by the fake account. If I didn't show up, Mina would probably stage some kind of scene anyway and claim I'd been there. Either way, I'd look guilty. I spent Thursday afternoon at the police station, filing reports about the fake social media accounts and the fraudulent posts. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, listened patiently but didn't seem optimistic about quick resolution. "Social media fraud cases take time to investigate," she explained. "We have to work with the platforms to verify account ownership, trace IP addresses, that sort of thing. Could take weeks." "I don't have weeks," I said. "The Harbor Days Festival is Saturday." "My advice? Stay home. Don't give anyone ammunition to use against you." But staying home felt like giving up, letting Mina win by default. I'd spent too many years letting other people control the narrative of my life. That evening, I called Lou at the gym and explained the situation. "Sounds like this woman wants to fight dirty," he said after I finished. "Any suggestions?" "Yeah, fight smarter, not harder." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't let her choose the battlefield. You choose it yourself." Friday morning, I put Lou's advice into action. Instead of hiding from the social media storm, I decided to get ahead of it. I created my own social media posts on my real accounts, explaining that someone had created fake profiles using my name and was posting threatening messages. I included screenshots of the fraudulent accounts and encouraged people to report them to the platforms. Then I did something that felt risky but necessary. I announced that I would be attending Harbor Days on Saturday, not to cause trouble, but to enjoy the festival like any other citizen. I invited anyone who was concerned about my intentions to approach me and see for themselves that I was just a normal person dealing with a vindictive ex-friend. The response was immediate and largely supportive. Several people commented that they'd suspected the threatening posts weren't authentic, and others shared their own experiences with social media harassment, but the most important response came from an unexpected source. Patricia Wells, the attorney who'd walked out of Mina's house earlier in the week. She sent me a private message. "Mr. Morrison, I think we should talk. I have information that might be helpful to your situation." We met at a coffee shop near the courthouse Friday afternoon. Patricia looked professional but troubled, like someone wrestling with an ethical dilemma. "I want to be clear that I'm no longer representing anyone in this matter," she said as we sat down. "But I'm concerned about what I witnessed the other night." "What do you mean?" "Ms. Rodriguez contacted me 3 weeks ago, claiming to represent Ms. Mitchell in a harassment case. She provided me with documentation that appeared to show a pattern of stalking and threatening behavior." "Appeared to show?" "The documents were very convincing. Screenshots of text messages, photos of you allegedly following Ms. Mitchell, witness statements from her coworkers. If they'd been authentic, they would have supported a strong case. I felt a chill run down my spine. But they weren't authentic? After what I witnessed at Ms. Rodriguez's house, I had my investigator take a closer look at the evidence. The metadata on the photos showed they'd been digitally manipulated. The text message screenshots had inconsistencies in the formatting. The witness statements contained information that contradicted publicly available records. Patricia leaned forward, her expression serious. "Mr. Morrison, someone spent considerable time and effort creating fake evidence against you. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was a carefully planned campaign. Can you prove that?" "I can prove the documents were fabricated, yes. Whether I can prove who fabricated them is another question." She handed me a manila folder. "Copies of everything, including my investigator's analysis. You'll want to share this with the police?" I opened the folder and saw page after page of technical analysis, showing exactly how the fake evidence had been created and manipulated. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "Because I don't like being used," Patricia said firmly. and because what Ms. Rodriguez was trying to do could have destroyed your life and ended my career if I'd filed those fraudulent documents. That evening, I took Patricia's evidence to the police station and met with Detective Sarah Chen, who specialized in cybercrime cases. "This is sophisticated work," she said, reviewing the technical analysis. "Whoever did this has significant digital skills and access to professional photo editing software." "Mina works in marketing," I said. "She'd have access to that kind of software." "We'll investigate, but I want to warn you that building a criminal case will take time. In the meantime, you should be very careful about your public appearances." "I'm planning to attend Harbor Days tomorrow." Detective Chen frowned. "That might not be wise." "If I don't show up, she wins. If I do show up and something happens, at least there will be witnesses to what really occurred." "If you're determined to go, I'd suggest bringing someone with you, a witness who can verify your behavior and document anything unusual that happens." I called Lou as soon as I left the police station. "You need backup for tomorrow?" he asked after I explained the situation. "If you're available." "Kid, I've been waiting 40 years for someone to give me a good reason to attend Harbor Days. This is it." Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, with the kind of crisp autumn air that made the harbor sparkle like diamonds. Harbor Days was the city's biggest celebration, drawing thousands of visitors to the waterfront for food, music, and local crafts. Lou and I arrived at the festival around 11 a.m., an hour before the time mentioned in the fake social media post. We positioned ourselves near the main stage where we could observe the crowd and document anything unusual. "There," Lou said, nodding toward the food vendors. "Your girlfriend and her boyfriend." I spotted Sloane and Elliot near a seafood stand, both looking nervous and scanning the crowd constantly. They were clearly expecting something to happen. "And there's the puppet master," I said, pointing toward the craft booths. Mina was standing near a jewelry vendor, holding her phone and recording video of the crowd. She was positioned to get a clear shot of the main stage area. "She's documenting whatever she's planning," Lou observed. "Smart." At 11:45, I noticed unusual activity near the stage. Several people were setting up what looked like recording equipment, and a small crowd was gathering in anticipation of some kind of event. "Showtime," I said. At exactly noon, a woman I didn't recognize approached the stage microphone. She was in her 30s, professionally dressed, and spoke with the confidence of someone accustomed to public speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "I'm here today to expose a dangerous individual who has been stalking and threatening members of our community." The crowd grew quiet, drawn in by the dramatic opening. "Jake Morrison has been harassing my friend Sloane Mitchell for weeks," the woman continued. "He's made threats against her, vandalized her boyfriend's property, and posted threatening messages on social media. He's here today, somewhere in this crowd, planning to cause trouble." I felt Lou tense beside me, ready to move if necessary. "But we're not going to let him intimidate us," the woman declared. "We're going to show him that our community doesn't tolerate harassment and threats." The crowd was murmuring now, some people looking around nervously, others pulling out their phones to record. That's when I made my move. I walked calmly toward the stage, Lou following a few steps behind. The crowd parted as I approached, conversation stopping as people recognized me from the social media posts. "Excuse me," I said loudly enough for the microphone to pick up my voice. "I think you're talking about me." The woman at the microphone looked startled, clearly not expecting me to approach directly. "I'm Jake Morrison," I continued, stepping up onto the stage, "and I'd like to address these accusations." The crowd was completely silent now, everyone watching to see what would happen next. "First," I said, speaking directly into the microphone, "I want everyone here to know that I didn't post any threatening messages on social media. Someone created fake accounts using my name and photos to make it look like I was stalking and threatening people." I pulled out my phone and showed the screen to the crowd. "I reported these fake accounts to the police yesterday, and I have evidence that they were created by someone trying to frame me." The woman who'd been speaking tried to interrupt, but I continued. "Second, I want you all to see how this scam works. The person who organized this little performance is standing right over there." I pointed directly at Mina, who was still recording with her phone. "Her name is Mina Rodriguez, and she's been orchestrating a campaign to destroy my reputation because she's angry about a workplace dispute from 2 years ago." Mina's face went white as hundreds of people turned to look at her. "She manipulated my ex-girlfriend into having an affair, tried to build a fraudulent legal case against me using fake evidence, and created those social media accounts to make me look dangerous." I held up Patricia's folder. "I have documentation proving that all the evidence against me was fabricated, analyzed by a professional investigator and reviewed by the police." The crowd was alive now, buzzing like a hive that had just been disturbed but hadn't yet decided whether to sting. Conversations rippled outward from the stage, overlapping fragments of speculation and surprise. People were turning their heads, glancing between Mina and me, whispering in tones that carried just enough for me to hear the edges of my own name. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, letting my voice rise above the murmurs without shouting. I wanted calm authority, not fury. My words carried clearly across the Harbor Days festival grounds, the smell of grilled seafood and sea salt mixing with the faint thrum of distant music. I'm going to enjoy Harbor Days like any other citizen. I'm going to buy some seafood, listen to some music, and maybe win a stuffed animal at the ring toss. That last line earned a few chuckles, not loud laughter, but the kind that diffuses tension, a collective exhale that says maybe things aren't as ugly as they seemed. And if anyone has questions about my character or my intentions, I continued, scanning the crowd, you're welcome to come talk to me. I'll be here all afternoon, acting like the normal, non-threatening person I actually am. There was a beat of silence, the good kind, before the crowd began to shift again. People turned back toward the food stalls, the craft tents, the stage where a band was setting up. Conversations moved on. The narrative had slipped from Mina's hands and was now dissolving into everyday noise. I stepped down from the stage, the wooden steps creaking beneath my boots. Lou was waiting at the bottom, a proud grin plastered across his weathered face. He clapped me on the shoulder as I reached him. "That was beautiful, kid," he said. "You turned their own weapon against them. She wanted a scandal. You gave them sincerity. Nobody knows how to fight that." "Let's hope it sticks," I said, but even as I spoke, I knew it already had. Behind us, the woman who'd handed Mina the microphone was trying to salvage the moment, calling for attention, trying to steer the crowd back to the official schedule. But no one was listening anymore. The air was thick with the smell of fried clams and popcorn, laughter, chatter, the sounds of normal life rushing in to fill the space where chaos had tried to grow. Harbor Days was returning to itself. Mina, of course, was gone. She'd vanished the moment I pointed her out, disappeared into the crowd like smoke from a fading fire. I pictured her pushing through people, face flushed with humiliation, realizing that the trap she'd set for me had snapped shut on her instead. Somewhere out there, she was probably cursing my name, already rewriting the story in her head to make herself the victim. But it didn't matter. The truth had already taken root in the crowd, and truth has a way of lasting where lies don't. Sloane and Elliot were still by the seafood stand, looking stunned. They'd been part of Mina's audience, maybe even her pawns, but now they just looked lost. When I passed them, Sloane caught my eye. Her face softened, and she mouthed a single word. "Sorry." I gave a small nod, nothing more. There was no need for bitterness. The damage she'd helped cause had already begun to heal, and forgiveness was easier when you'd finally stopped bleeding. The rest of Harbor Days unfolded quietly, almost tenderly. People approached me one by one. A retired teacher, a couple from the marina, even a group of teenagers who'd been watching from near the dunk tank. Some offered words of support, others just asked what had really happened. I told the truth, calmly, without drama. I let my behavior speak louder than any defense I could offer. The more I talked, the more I saw the doubt fade from their eyes. By mid-afternoon, I wasn't the guy from the rumors anymore. I was just Nick again, the one who fixed boats, volunteered at the shelter, and showed up every year for the festival. As the sun began to lower over the harbor, the air turned cooler and the sky bled into gold. The fake social media accounts, the ones Mina had used to spread her lies, had vanished. Deleted, wiped clean, their hollow accusations already replaced by people sharing the truth. Screenshots circulated, messages exposed. By evening, the town knew who had been behind it all. Mina's reputation, once pristine, was collapsing faster than she could hide it. The community that had once listened to her now treated her like static. Background noise you tune out and forget. When the last song faded and the vendors started closing up, I walked home through the quiet streets. The festival lights behind me glimmered against the water, their reflections rippling like half-forgotten memories. My footsteps echoed on the pavement, slow and steady, each one lighter than the last. For the first time in months, I felt peace, not the brittle peace of exhaustion, but the kind that comes from surviving something ugly and knowing it can't touch you anymore. The lies, the manipulations, the fear of what people thought, all of it had lost its hold. The war was over.